Oh, and hello in Australia.
Hello, welcome. Um, ma ta ismka, Tseshaht First Suma as, Mamuk his Yaatlat, Tatak Sapayak Mahti, ta ismka Achak Hak.
Ohukwa umiaksu deb, Foxcroft, Ohukwa Nuu-chah-nulth Mike, Foxcroft, Ohukwitah Nana-niaksu Jim, Jan Gallic, Histakshaklah Gallic Takimsh, Klayahoash Sitwa, Pluyachiatah Shimaqsti Natuash Sitwa, Achak Hak.
Oklamah Chiismka, Tseshaht Histakshaklah Tumaas, Ohukwa umiaksu deb, Ohukwa Nuu-chah-nulth Mike Foxcroft, Ohukwita Nana-niaksu Jan Jim Gallic. True. So thank you very much. Just an intro, putting our language first, just introducing to you Ta'isamka, also known as Dawn Foxcroft of Tseshaht. We both live in our traditional territory of Sumaas, and Dawn works at Ya'at Tataksapayak Mahti, our Tseshaht language house. And we are both, Dawn is also my younger sister. I'm the older sister. She's the more mature one. And we are both working and learning in our territory, in our Tseshaht territory called Sumaas. Other people might know it as Port Alberni. And Dawn has been a committed language advocate, learner, nurturer in our community for the past decade almost. And so we're just going to talk a little bit more, practice a little bit more, and then get into some back and forth, some fireside chat to help you listen a little bit about the journey that we're in together and with a lot of other great people. Ta'isoka, chachimhe hak.
Oh, ha'a chachimhe mah. Yukwa hak chachimhe.
Wika chachimhe pusaka.
Oh, pusak hak.
Ha'a pusaka.
Akanap hak.
Ha'okma.
Oh.
Ha'okwa.
Oh, yatsuk hak.
Wika yatsuk ha'okwa.
Oh, ha'okhak.
Ha'a ha'okwa. Ha'okwa kaspintapia. True. Ta'isamka, can you tell me the story of the last 6 years or so of language work and what has brought you to this and here today?
Yeah, so I'm I guess 2016 is when I convocated with my master's in education in the Indigenous Language Revitalization program from the University of Victoria. And I'm really proud of that milestone. The program provided me with a lot of knowledge, but I think more importantly, and I think I'm going to talk about this quite a bit, is with a lot of relationships with language champions and warriors from all over the province and Canada, who are both instructors and students of the program. Having a network of people to connect with, ask questions of, and get support in language work has been really vital for me in the past 6 years, but more specifically in the past 3 years, since 2019, when we started our language program in Tseshaht. And this is really the same in terms of having a strong Nuu-chah-nulth network of peers and learners and speakers who are also language program administrators. And these networks are really important. And I say networks, but I mean relationships. Like, these are so important for the work of language revitalization in our communities, and having people to connect with, to help stay focused, to help feel supported. and to be able to laugh with and hang out with and, grow with. So, but most importantly is being in relationship with our speakers and our elders who have been just so generous with their knowledge and gifts, and have, not just in the last 6 years, but obviously before that, we started ourselves at Hahopayak in Port Alberni here, our community school, where we started our language learning journey as children. And we're really given a really great foundation of language. And then there was really nothing in our community until, we were older, and as an adult learner, spent a lot of time making opportunities, taking whatever opportunities there were to learn. So I'm really happy now to be able to help create opportunities for adult learners to learn our language. But we wouldn't be able to do the work we do, and I think this is the case in all communities, without the foundation of, our Tseshaht and Nuu-chah-nulth language champions, who did, such great work to leave us with great language, and those who continue to work with us and are patient with us to teach us and help us grow and learn. Those are really super vital relationships. And I just want to thank all of them. And yeah, we wouldn't be able to do the work we do without them, and without, their courage and strength to bring and hold forward our language to today. And in 2019, our nation, Tseshaht, received language funding. And so myself, along with a handful of other community members who were actively working in language or learning language, were brought together to talk about language activities in our community, what that could look like. And just after that, I was hired as the language coordinator for Tseshaht. And we've built an amazing team and are building a strong language program where we focus on documentation and creating an adult immersion or intensive program that's aimed to build speakers and teachers of our language.
That's awesome. Can you tell me more about specifically the adult intensive and the last 6 months of that intensive immersion program that began just this past October?
Yeah, so one of the activities we've put a lot of time and energy into is in our language program is developing an adult intensive immersion program. And although we have other projects on the go, it's the one I want to highlight here today. A bit about, and talk a bit about how we got here and why we're doing what we're doing. So after, during when I was at UVic and after UVic, I was really inspired by the work of Gatangeha, Sichavlin, Skomish, Seal, where they're creating second language speakers and teachers. So when you look at Fishman's graded intergenerational disruption scale, we're around our language, Tseshaht is sitting around 7 or 8, which means that it is under a lot of pressure. And we don't have a lot of fluent speakers left in our language. So we need to be super strategic right now on our approach to strengthening our language. And our main focus has been with our language program that we just started, I guess, essentially in 2019, has been documentation. Continuing to do documentation. There has been in the past documentation done, so we're really lucky about that. So we weren't starting from scratch. We were able to pick up and continue on with work that had been done previously. And then also creating a second language speakers with the help of our remaining speakers and those learners who will learn the language and bring the language into their homes and use with their families and children, and also would teach the language in whatever venue that looks like or in whatever way that looks like. So after some research and talking to peers in other communities who are doing this work, we began to develop an intensive program that was launched last October. And so we primarily use Where Are Your Keys as a structure and a base and an approach for our program. It has been challenging due to having a pandemic, but we have a small and mighty team of learners who are also learning how to teach and helping build the program and lessons as we go. We have a group of 4 new learners and then a teacher team of 3, so 7 of us all together, and we meet 3 mornings a week. Yeah, and it's a good number of people, to be honest. Like during these challenging times, we've been able to meet in person up until now, which has been quite a gift. And I don't think we would have been able to do that if we were a larger group. And it was really important for us to build a strong team for this program, especially as our first cohort, who are helping us to like test and create lessons as we go. And I think for me is like one of the great takeaways from this is that is like how much we learn as we teach. So even though most of our new learners have only been like really committed or focused on learning our language for the past 6 months, they've all already taught each other lessons that we have. Oh yeah, I have a question for you. So as one of the learners and co-creators of this experience of our program, how has this experience been for you? And can you tell us a story of something that stands out for you and how the approach we are taking supports your language learning and for you to become conversational?
So thank you. So what a gift to give our time to our language, and even more so, just a really big gift to do that alongside my sister. So for us to create and nurture language in such a loving way has been really healing for me. I think a lot of folks, maybe that's not their experience all of the time with language, and we really have worked in this program. And I think I'll speak to the experience has been just a really loving, fun, and safe space for us to be able to not just learn language, but to be able to be adult learners. I think when we come to a space when we're adults, we might have a lot of unlearning to do about even the way that institutionalized learning from elementary school has taught us like certain ways to learn. And language, what I've learned in my experience in the past 6 months is language maybe isn't best learned that way. That it's not a memorize and kind of regurgitate back. The way that we're learning using where are your keys alongside like also making sure we pay attention to our bodies and our relationships, using breath. Where are your keys allows us to not be out of the language or out of immersion while still using signs like slow down or speed up, or can we do that again without having to revert into English. And so it keeps a very protective bubble around not just the language, but the learner has been the good part. And so that creates a lot of like good principles for learning when you know that one of the core pieces is that you are supported all the way and you can ask for help. So all of the learners around me, while we're speaking, will be also accompanying what we're saying with signs. And so by seeing the signs, I get a visual cue, and so I can remember the words. And so all of these modalities are used, but none of it is written. It's all like focused on speaking. And it's this embodied experience that has really helped my proficiency to stay in the language, to become conversational, but also just thinking of the way we've been working with where are your keys and only kind of being in conversation and just kind of fumbling and mumbling through it in a lot of cases has also helped me put the language in context, which is one thing that I've not been able to do before, even as a child learner. We've had lots of vocabulary, lots of understanding of like, being able to point to our body parts or things like that. Like that good language foundation is there. Also making the sounds. I think doing that a little bit from childhood has been helpful to be able to pronounce some of the beautiful and complex and subtle sounds that are in Nuu-chah-nulth and in Tseshaht. And so the thing about something that stands out about the approach of combining relationship in a small group, some very good, strong principles and practices that help us support each other and create a good sense of safety, a bubble for the learner, as well as an immersion bubble for the language. I think one of the stories that I would think of is just the way that something as simple as a regular practice of lists, which is something that we are doing each morning, but have done. So the lists help, the lists are word lists. They help you with person endings and mood endings, but I would have never known that or made that connection between the way the sentence is contextualized and what I'm saying unless we ran those lists on a regular basis and before we do the work. So before we go into a lesson, we teach a lesson, we practice and go through lists that tell you the parts and components of the sentence, and then you put it together in context of a conversation. And there's something about that practice that has made light bulbs go off for so many of us of the difference between being able to express something someone else is doing, something I am doing, something that we are doing. And that's something I've never had. I've never had those components that help me put together sentences. All I've had is kind of like a couple ingredients of vocabulary. And so just like these like simple pieces put together with the tools that allow me to both use my words with enough familiarity and then being able to put them in context and then in relationship with each other in conversation. It's just really brought things to wholeness. It's like a very holistic way of being in language, and none of it's written. I haven't had to write or really look through documents. It's not been in that sort of traditional school, look at this, spell this, memorize this, and it's so experiential. And so that's not a short answer, but I hope it's really helpful for all of you to hear a little bit about the ways that this particular combination of tools and processes have been so helpful. So ta'isamka at Ya'at Tatak Sapayak Mahti, we have been working like really emergently and learning as we go, learning alongside each other using immersion that's really been supported by speakers, learners, and the Where Are Your Keys method. Can you tell me a bit more about why you think that's working?
Yeah. So we have a number of things going on at the same time. We're teaching and testing lessons with students, and we're having students teach the lessons that they're learning to each other and to us. And we're writing lessons. We have a writing team as well that's happening in the week, not during classes. So we're testing these lessons as well and writing, and we're testing them with fluent speakers. So we're using, and we're getting guidance from them. We're using Where Are Your Keys techniques. And I don't know if I might just quickly introduce what that is, just in case people don't know what that is, but it uses a form of ASL. I wouldn't say it's entirely ASL, and I don't know ASL at all. So I'm just kind of mumbling as I go and figuring it out. But it's the idea of total physical response, like you're using your body as well to learn. And so we're using signs, and it works as a subtitle to the language. So it can help with memory or helping people be reminded of words or something that they've forgotten. You can use the sign, and that often will trigger the language. But also there's like a bunch of techniques so people have control of their own learning in a situation. So they can ask for something again, or like for people to slow down, or I need that like 3 more times, or like, actually, I'm all done. So, and you don't need to use English. So it really helps to create an immersive environment. There's sort of other structures that comes with the whole thing, which has been really helpful in terms of just starting an adult intensive program from scratch. It's just helped us get a lot further faster, which has been really great, because that's what we need right now, because we really need to be learning and not be working really hard on creating a whole system. So it's been really nice that there's a system And there's been a lot of support. So we've been using Where Are Your Keys and having guidance from the Where Are Your Keys team, and also other communities that are using this approach, like Skomish, like they've had so much success in their program, and this is the approach that they have taken. So we're also using it, and it provides the structures for delivery. And what it does also, which I've witnessed and been really excited about, is at a very beginner level, it creates a space of immersion. So at a very beginner level, we can stay in the conversation, in a conversation. It might be a simple conversation, but we can stay in a conversation for a long period of time. And I think that's just a really exciting thing, because I've heard our speakers say, like, what's the use of our language unless we're speaking it, right? So our language is meant to be spoken. And so with what we're doing is we're trying to just really lean heavy into speaking right away. And so the structure of the lessons also really helps students to be able to pick them up and teach them right away. They're set up in a way that all of the lessons kind of follow the same structure of, and we do a lot of repetition, and we send it around. So it really allows people to be able to pick it up and take it and run with it. And for me, the most important part of the approach, which Tseshaht was talking about, is that it's really rooted in fun and safety, and is really supportive. So no one is left out in the wind by themselves, and everybody is there to help lift each other up and help each other along. And in doing that, language is reinforced, because we're helping each other. When it's your turn, you're not alone. Somebody there, everybody there is helping you figure out what you're supposed to be saying. So even if you forgot, somebody's there to remind you, and that's how it's set up. So I really, really value that approach, is that, like, it's very safe, and we're all really held, even as facilitators of the process. The other thing I think is really important is that it's set up that no matter who is there, the program can keep going. So if the whole teaching team wasn't there, students could pick up and have a session, have the morning and do the whole program, do a whole morning without a teaching team there. We have a set schedule. We have a routine that we do every morning. They could do that. They could find lessons that they need to teach, and teach them to each other. So it really, there's a really, I think in traditional learning settings, there's an expert, right? And a teacher, and then there's students. And in this sense, we all shift roles all of the time. And so that the program can just keep going no matter who is there. And also it allows for participants in the program to be able to, and that's the hope. I mean, we've only been doing it for 6 months, but to go out, right, into community and be able to carry you can lead these lessons with them and be able to deliver it in another setting, because they've already practiced that with each other and practiced that in a safe space. And nobody is going to be doing that alone. So I think that's really super valuable. So it doesn't rely on one person at all for things to keep going. People can learn and keep growing no matter what, no matter who is there.
It's true. I've already taught several lessons, and I've been able to bring them into my kids, starting with some basic introduction, and just starting with those foundational pieces has been really exciting and really fun. Ta'isoka, witnessing. I was thinking about witnessing and just how it's a really powerful, important work for Nuu-chah-nulth and for Tseshaht. The role of witnessing in so many of our community events and ceremonies. Could you tell us a story about maybe a powerful moment that you've witnessed in our program that helps you know that we are on the right track with this season and with this language program?
Yeah, so this is very recently, we've shifted in the new year to doing some training on language hunting. So it's pulling language from speakers. And so we've been learning and practicing this skill as a group, and we're going to continue to do that. And I actually had to step out. And so I had stepped back in and was just I wasn't a part of that whole first setting it up or anything. I had an appointment. So came back on and got to see just this magic happen. where yourself and Kwatsapi had jumped in to be language hunters as beginner learners, language hunters, and weren't afraid. If you just jumped in, were like not afraid to get things wrong and like or make mistakes, and you're just like really really eager. And I think that's really powerful as a language learner, is just to be able to get into the space of doing it. I think there's often when we're learning, there's like this barrier of like getting to a place where you're like, okay, I'm just going to use the language, because it can be really, it can give us a lot of anxiety. So if you can get to that space quick, then that's a big step. But I saw both of you, and I was able to witness both of you use the language that after 6 months, 3 mornings a week. So we're not even full time, but be able to use the language to stay in conversation and to learn more language. And that's a huge skill, to learn language. Like if you can get to also a place where you can use the language to learn more language, then it's endless. You can be in a situation and you can be like, okay, I know how to like pull some more language from somebody. So as beginner learners, to be able to stay in the language, I don't know how long that was. It's probably at least 20 minutes. You were able to stay in a conversation for 20 minutes. You had each other's support with a speaker. That for me, I was like really, really excited by that. And then again, this past week, we did another language hunt, as a group, and we were able to stay in the language for 45 minutes with a speaker, and yourself and Huash Huip were there to like help, and you were able to carry language that was new to me. Even you were able to like be in that language with me, and send it around and have a conversation with that very new language for 45 minutes. And I think that was really impressive. And it just really made me feel like, yay, like we're doing something. I don't think, when I think back in my learning, I wouldn't have, if I had started 6 months later, I don't think I would have been able to do that. I wouldn't have had the confidence to even try. So for me, that was a really like big moment. Like, I'm like, it's that we're on the right path. And we have people that are at least not afraid to try. And I think that's really, really vital, and also can use language that they know to learn more language. So you can do it on your own.
Yeah, I'll just clarify. So when Simka's talking about a language hunt, it's when we set up for a set time with a fluent speaker, with someone that has more language than me, which doesn't necessarily, I think fluency is subjective, but set up with someone who speaks or has more language than you with, it could be a photograph or a book, or even a setup of objects like a coffee cup even, and be able to, in the language, start to go through a process of inquiry, ask some questions, which for me is like very simple, like, asking people like, akaka, like what, akaka, what is this? In really simple ways, and then being able to kind of follow the breadcrumb trail they leave for you a little bit. And so from just this past 6 months in learning, just nope, that isn't it. Or yes, that is it. Like being able to use the sign, which I just used, and some of the endings pick up on the root word, and then the way different endings are to know if I'm being asked a question and like what the response is. Anyways, so a language hunt is sitting in intentional time with a little bit of a setup, either photographs or images, to be able to inquire a little bit more and a little bit more deeply, and even say, is the language the same for this photograph as it is for this slightly different one, and see what might be true and how, because the language doesn't always function in the same linear descriptive way as English does. And so you find that out, and it's really fun. And it's really interesting, and I could feel a lot of like connections and light bulbs going off on that day as well. All of us in our program, we all have families and small children, and so this really is like a language family. Can you talk about the ways that that's important, and how it ripples out as a part of the language intention and strategy for this season, the setup of language learning?
Yeah, so I think we know that children absorb language really easily. And right now, like with our program, we're working on creating teachers of the language. But most importantly, we see that language is being used in the homes. And so this is really important that children are learning and have somewhere to use language. So in our community, we have Hahopayak, and many of our children go to the school and learn language. And so having somewhere else other than school for language to be used, I think is really important, so that it's a part of our daily lives and not just in the domain of the school system, right? Like, so kids know that it's not just something we do at school, it's something that we also do at home, or we also speak with auntie or, uncle or grandma. So one of the questions we asked when we interviewed participants for our program was, how would they use the language that they learned? And everyone in the program talked about using it with their children. And that's what's happening. So everyone has 2 hours of self-directed language to do outside. And mostly everyone spends all or some of their time teaching what they know to their kids and using the language that they're learning with their children, or looking at resources online, or videos that are online. And so this is like really important. And one, like it's a really key thing, I think, people, in language revitalization work, is getting our languages in our home and being used within our families is really important to the longevity and the use of our language. So in that sense, that's what we're trying to do, is like encouraging our participants to bring the language home, to use the language, use whatever language they know with their kids, and teach it to their kids.
During COVID, we've really worked, not just to create good safety in our classroom, but to prioritize wellness in a big way. And often we've had to move to this Zoom and technology-based way of working. Could you speak a little bit to the benefits, some of the benefits you're seeing of that, but as well as some of the challenges of working through Zoom with this language work that is often so relational?
Yeah, I'm sure so many people are feeling this right now, but so we've had to adapt to Zoom recently. We've had such a small group, so we've been able to meet in person with the proper precautions up until very recently. So it has been a challenge, and it's been really something that we've been working through as a team, trying to readapt and like get, I think like connect in an online space. And it can be really challenging in that there's like a lot of things that are unspoken, like body language, that in person is really easy to read and really easy to respond to, whereas online you can't catch it. And so like even like in terms of body language and learning language is really important, and how we're learning language, right? But also just being able to like see people's energy and knowing like when we need a break, or like when we need a change of activity, or when we need to get up and move around. It's so much harder online than in person. In person, it's like everybody catches it, or somebody like will be like, okay, yeah, let's get up and go. And I find that like online or in person, it's like, learning language can be tiring, but it's still energizing in person. Whereas online, it really sucks your energy out really, really fast. So we have to find tools, we have to find ways that we can, be energized and like laugh and have fun, so that we're, we're still moving forward in an energized way. But the good thing about it is we have an opportunity to keep learning. We don't have to stop. So, we've had this technology that we can continue to learn. We've had a number of years now to figure it out. And also, it took a long time to get our speakers online, and some of them, we haven't been able to, but we have been able to get some online, and that has been a real gift. And so we're able to connect with them online. And so that's really nice, I think, for us and for them. Also, I think one of the benefits too is that we can connect with and build relationships with, or continue relationships with other communities that are doing the same thing. So next week, we're going to go to Squamish's Yellow House online. So, in non-pandemic times, it would probably take a lot of money and like organizing. But this way we can just teletransport there in a morning and then teletransport back to our regular program. And so that's a real gift. And there's other communities too that we plan on visiting. Kwakwala, we've been in connection with as like a organizing team, and I'd love to be able to build that community out. So I think it's a lot easier online to build and make connections with the larger language community. However, like it would be, ideal to be in person because we can do all of the things that we would do. We would share a meal, we'd be able to thank people with gifts, and it's just a lot harder to do that now, but we still can. And so it's always good to try to find the positives in that. Yeah.
Cool. There's a lot of great questions I'm sure people are holding, and we're sort of just a little dipping past the halfway point. So I'm just wanting to shift and create a much more two-way conversation. So the first question I'm going to pick up out of the chat that came in is, hi, I'm Jeju. I'm from Jeju, Korea. Can you tell me more about your documentation work? Do you videotape fluent speakers as well? Tell how and where do you archive your recordings, and are they being used to make pedagogical materials? Are they accessible to the public?
Yeah, so primarily we've been doing, so we have our project is through First Voices, if you've heard of it. It's I think it's like specifically to BC. So we have a First Voices portal, and it's an online dictionary essentially. And so we got funding through that program. And so, so there is a portal, there's a Tseshaht portal on the First Voices website, and we've been building and growing that. So before we started our program in 2019, it was probably like a decade before that, a team started that. And so when we started, there was about like 1,300 words and phrases already on there. So great gift for us. And as a language learner, I've definitely used that resource a lot, and as a language teacher. So so that's where it is. And so primarily we've done audio recordings, and we've been building that over the last number of years. So it's grown pretty substantially, and we have a lot of recordings that we're working through still. So all of that, the intention of that work is to share. We want that language for language learners and for language teachers and to be accessible. So that's public. We have some video recordings, but we weren't able to get really into it. That was our plan. But we started in 2019 and everything shut down in 2020. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to get to that. So our first year project, we were like setting up a new program. We had like a new space. So we had to, there was like a lot of things, like we had to, get furniture, get equipment, find staff, and all of that kind of stuff. So the first year was really setting up the program, and then we were recording too, and then we were going to get into some video stuff, which unfortunately we never got to. And like a lot of, I think, communities in our circumstance, we've been losing our speakers, and so and it's been a big hit. But we have all of the gifts of language that they have already left with us, and most of that's just audio recordings, and they are on our site or will be on our site. We're working on that. We do have, like in Tseshaht, have an archive and have been given recordings, but we need to like really spend a lot of time going through them to see like what they can be used for, and permissions and that kind of stuff. But the stuff that we are recording is all available to the public, and is definitely used like as we're going, we're using it, for our, like when we're testing our lessons on our speaker, we record that. So so in that sense, it's being used for, education materials as well.
Next question. I'm going to pull it up from the Q&A. You say we send it around. What does that mean?
We send it around. So we sit in a circle, and there's a back and forth like question and answer, and that's how it's set up. And so there's a number of rounds of that, or parts. And so like the first part might be, we call it a make me say yes. And then the second part's a make me say no. And then there's an open-ended question. Sometimes our lessons start with an open-ended question, and sometimes our lessons end with a free-for-all. So you can just ask whatever you want. And so each of those parts gets sent around the group. So we have 7 people. We're in a circle. I'll ask Tseshaht, and we repeat it mostly 3 times, the same question and answer. And then I ask, are you done? Do you need it again? Do you want it 3 more times? She'll be like, I'm done. And then I'll be like, pew. And then she'll ask the next person. And then they'll ask the next person, and they'll ask the next. And so that's the round. We send it around that way. Every part of the lesson gets sent around. And then the people that aren't a part of that conversation are, they're angeling. And so they're doing the signs to help that person be able to answer the question, or the person be able to ask.
All right. Back to chat, a question from YouTube. I'm a speaker of a small language called Yusuyan. Pardon me if I didn't say that right. And we have no language resources for our language. What resources would you recommend we use?
Oh, that's a good question. So there's no resource. It's hard to know, like, is it possible to create resources? And like, do you have speakers? I guess I have more questions than answers for that. If you have speakers, then they're your best resource, and doing documentation as you go. Yeah, and creating, I think it would be creating your resources. Definitely. Like if you have speakers, I think it's like, and you don't have any resources, you probably, somebody needs to do that. And the time is likely now. I don't know if that's fairly helpful.
True. Question from Q&A. How do you set up your learning space? It seems like a lot of language groups that succeed in their immersion programs have comfortable space where they meet and learn that really doesn't feel like a classroom.
Yeah, so we were really fortunate that our nation gave us a space. Super, super fortunate. So we call it's our language house. We wanted to set it up, like the intention was to set it up like a house, and it used to be an adult center, and it was like a business space, office space, but it has like a kind of a kitchen, and then it has like a larger sort of meeting space, and then it has 2 offices and kind of a little area. So the area that you come in, we set up like a living room. So there's like 2 couches and a coffee table. And then we have some tables that fold up and down. And so we can like either bring those outside or set them up in like the larger space. And then we have offices, because you like obviously need offices for all of the other stuff, and a kitchen. And at first, when we first started the program, we were really working at bringing together speakers, and we really wanted a space where they felt comfortable, like it was a home environment. So, and that they could, our speakers in our community have, they're older, and so they need a space to be able to rest. So, when we were working with our speaker that we just lost, we'd often like work for, an hour, like do documentation, have a lot of fun. But we'd also need to give space and time to rest. So he would be able to go and like take a nap even on the couch. And we were able to make food because we have like the kitchen. And so I think like a non-traditional like classroom setting is really helpful if you can do it. And I know in lots of cases, it's just like whatever space you can get. Like, I feel like we're really lucky to be able to have the space that we've been given, and we're able to make it what we needed to make it. So we have a comfortable area. We can have like kind of a more classroom area setting, but we do like to sit in circle as much as possible. I mean, it's been a little bit harder. Like we've had to be spaced out for the last, since we started because of the pandemic.
Awesome. Another one from YouTube. I have a question. Do you ever encounter friction about how the language should be spoken? Purism or prescriptivism? How do you keep the learning space safe and fun in the face of those feelings, if they exist? That's such a good question.
Yeah, well, I think pronunciation is really important, because you can say words, I guess in lots of languages, you can say words slightly different and they mean slightly different things. I did this today with one of our speakers online. We were doing documentation. We've been using Zoom because it has been working. We can't meet in person, but it also gets a pretty good laugh. So that's always good. Yeah, so I think in the learning space, I think like right now, our focus with our beginner learners is to get them to a place where they have the ability to use language to learn more language, because there's like comprehensible input, right? So we would love to, we will bring in our speakers to meet with them and work with them, but we want them to be able to understand our speakers too, or at least have a level of understanding. Sometimes when you're a real beginner and you're listening to speaker, it's great, right? Like you can hear all the different things, but if you don't have comprehensible input, like if you don't understand at least pieces of it to be able to put together, it's hard to learn from it as a very beginner learner. So our learners, we are pretty selective about we're slow to, we call it accent adjustment. So like at the very beginning of our program, we let people mumble through and just say things because we want it to be a really supportive environment. And as we've been going, and now we're like adjusting the accent and pronunciation, right? Like, oh, I hear you say that a little bit different. Like, do you want me to, accent adjust you? And so most people are, like our students are really open to that. And we do a lot of laughing and, but yeah, so there are specific ways of saying words, and it is important. But I think like we're trying to approach it in a way that's really like encouraging, right? So like, instead of accent adjusting one person, we'll just be like, okay, guys, like you're saying this, we're like, that's not right, but this is how you say it, right? And so we'll do the two different versions and everybody gets to say it and we can send it to them. Like we can boomerang it. So I'll be like, I'll say, uk shlama. And then I'll like boomerang it to somebody.
Uk shlama.
Right. And then I'll boomerang it to somebody else. And so then we go around. So it's more of a correction to a group instead of just individuals over and over again.
Uk.
Oh.
Uk shlama.
Uk shlama. Uk shlama.
Uk shlama.
Yeah, and then we also have this technique that if maybe I'm accent adjusting one student over and over and over again, somebody will be no, just to stop, because there's the point, I think. But we just like the most important thing is creating an encouraging, supportive language learning environment, and everybody's open to learning and also being corrected.
Right. And some other things that we can do as learners and asking, so we can ask like, can you slow that down? There's also a technique called backwards buildup, where it might be a complex word with like many different syllables in it. And so they'll, one of our instructors will pronounce it from the back and just start putting it together slowly for us. But if it's just too much, I can do this and everything stops and we go for a break, which means I'm drowning, like I'm overwhelmed and can't do anymore. So we can ask for a break anytime that we need. And after and during any lesson, if I'm teaching a lesson and sharing my learning with others, in between, I can do this with people. So I'm pointing at you. And it's called a full check. And so then the learners who are participating in the lesson can go, I'm okay, I'm about here, or like my nose is underwater and I, okay, let's stretch. Katskip, starfish is our sign. Katskip, take a breath. Take a 5-minute break. So the full check is really good. The like, help me, I'm drowning. And just being, that's the kind of way that we could create safety for those particular questions that I think in other learning environments, I haven't had that. And it's made a really big difference to just be like, it's, and the sons, those things are funny. Like, no, it's like stop, make it stop. There's a lot of humor and Tseshaht and Nuu-chah-nulth people and learners and elders, like we are funny. We are funny people. We have a funny sense of humor. And I think that the combination of language and learning and love and humor is just a recipe for success in so many ways.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that too, is like one of the things that we tell participants at the very beginning is there's many different ways to say things. So, you might be talking to a speaker and they'll have a different way of saying it. And that's the beauty of our language, right? And we're teaching, we can't teach everything all at once. And often we're teaching a long cut, so a long version. And so maybe in conversation with a fluent speaker, they'll do a shortcut, right? They'll like merge a bunch of things together, but we want people to know why there's, what they're saying and why they're saying it. So, we're like, if a speaker says something different, that's, like there's lots of ways, to say different things. And that's great. And there's also lots of different accents up and down the coast here. We have a Barkley, we're Barkley, but even in our community, it's different than, we say different things than Nuu-chah-nulth, which is Barkley speaking too, but it's a different, it's a different community. So there's just lots of ways to say things. And we always tell them that the elders and speakers are always right. So they're the experts.
Yeah. Dawn, there is a question on the Q&A. How has COVID-19 been affecting your programming, staff, and learners? Any advice on other language revitalization teams who might be struggling with COVID?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's a struggle. And I'm sure everybody is feeling that, just constantly problem solving and being creative. I would say the most challenging part of our program that's been affected by COVID is the documentation part, because being, relationship is so important with our speakers. And, we would have speakers in our language house, we'd be able to feed them, and we can't do that. And it's, that's how we want to gift them. They're giving us so much. And also our speakers, I think I meant to say this a long time ago, I started rambling about something else, but, they're in their like late 70s, 80s, and technology is not, and they don't need to learn technology, right? Like, it's not easy for them. Even the recorders we're finding, even like we're trying to find the simplest recorder, even the recorders are really hard. And, it's like this balance of being like, hey, do you want to do some recordings? And they'll be like, yes. And then we don't want to like make them feel pressure or uncomfortable. So it's been a lot harder to create like a safe, comfortable environment for speakers to do documentation. Again, we were fortunate to be able to get 2 speakers online with like an iPad. And so that's been really great. And it's been great to be able to visit them on there. And we've just been recording using Zoom. And like, we know the audio is not the best, but we need to get what we can right now. Time is a factor, and, and they're willing and able to help us, then we need to be available and willing to be helped and supported. So I would say, yeah, that's the biggest struggle. I think, being on Zoom and working from home is hard as a team. Like, I think in our communities, Indigenous communities, it is about connection and relationship. And so when we're together, I think we can be more creative. I think we can feel more supported. When we're apart like this and only meeting on screens or not even seeing each other very often, it can be just really hard to stay positive and stay motivated. So, I mean, just trying to get our team together, check in with each other, especially people that I know on our team that don't live with a big family, just to be able to connect with them and just check in with them and see how they're doing, I think is really, really important. And the hope is that this isn't going to last much longer. So just to like keep going. But we've been really fortunate that we've been, we have a really talented team, and we've been able to keep being creative and adapting and doing the work we can. And I feel like we've done a lot, considering we've had to work in some difficult situations or circumstances.
Question from the chat. Do you incorporate humor specifically as a teaching tool?
Oh, I would say so. I think our whole thing, our whole shtick is really about being like as silly as possible. One of the things that we were talking about, because we do application process. So part of the application process is doing an interview. And one of the things I'm going to add when we do another intake is getting people to do silly things, because it's like really at the base, like you have to be able to be silly and feel ridiculous to do the learning and how we're doing it. But it also like helps people get into like a space where they can just try something that maybe they feel really uncomfortable trying, right? Like they want to do it, right? Like everybody wants to learn the language, of course, but like to actually like start speaking it, it can, especially as an adult, we always want to be able to, as an adult, we want to do things right away. Kids don't care as much, right? Whereas an adult, we want to like be right and like do it right. We don't want to look silly, but so if we can create a silly environment from the get-go, that's like the most important thing. So one of the things we're going to do in our intakes the next time is get people to do signs, especially like maybe like this, you know, like just making sure that they can get into that space to be able to be silly. So I would say most of our program is pretty much structured around being silly. One of the things, so there's like oh, how fascinating technique, whereas like if you screw up, or if you want to celebrate something you did, you go, oh, how fascinating. But we've transitioned it over to this. So if you say something wrong or you've screwed up what you're supposed to say, you can go blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of a reset and everybody thinks it's funny. So
two other funny things. So one of the big principles for all of our learners that are alongside me and just kind of like mumbling along a lot of the time is fail fast. It's a really important. So, you know, a lot of times we don't feel ready or necessarily like we've achieved mastery, but the way to achieve mastery is practice. And so we have to fail fast. We have to jump in the frying pan and do the work. So that requires you to like leave your inhibitions behind that are often really deeply kind of programmed in us as adults. Like there's one way, there's the right way, you know, all of those things that get put into us, and humor helps us like really kind of let it go and loosen up. So one humorous thing that I thought of right away, Dawn, was when we are practicing a sentence and we have to say it, you know, 3 times. So I say, I'll ask Dawn like, achak lahak, and then Dawn will have to answer. And we'll do it 3 times, almost every time. But we do this thing where, well, do it. Achak lahak. Really.
Klama ta isumka.
Achak lahak.
Klama ta isumka. Klama ta isumka.
And when we're on Zoom, or it's like, you know, morning 3, like today, when we're really tired, when someone, like anyone will just throw that in and it really lightens up the place. It really like helps us stay engaged in the necessary repetition of it all, because the repetition is incredibly important, but can become, you know, it gets boring, you know, quite fast sometimes. So being able to add in, we do funny voices. That's called high-low. It's a technique, high-low, where we do it in the low voice and in the high voice. And it's super helpful.
Yeah, it just shakes things up a little bit.
I don't see any other questions. It looks like we're at time.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening. Ushak shikleetsu.
Ushak shikleets.
Aphez shamaits naatah. See ya.
Chooch.
Thank you both so much for being here today and sharing. This was a really fun session on top of very informative. So thanks on behalf of everybody here and everybody who will watch. I hope y'all can join us tomorrow in about 9 hours for a talk by Emmanuel Nguyen. This one's going to be a treat. He's going to give his talk mostly in his own language, Basa, with an English translator. So hope you can join us. And let's get a virtual round of applause again for Kelly and Dawn. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. We are
Thanks, everyone.